Hello and welcome. Thanks for tuning in with me here at the Wayne County Extension Office. You're back in the Fine Arts Department and we're shifting gears to barn quilt painting today. I want to show you how to draw your own barn quilt design, but I don't want to show you in this video how to draw the pattern itself. I actually want to focus on showing you how to lay out the foundation for it. And once you get the foundation drawn, which is basically a grid, then drawing out the pattern is self-explanatory. Now, whenever you take a class with me, you'll get a booklet that looks like this. It features a variety of patterns that you can choose from that are all simple to do, so don't be intimidated by it if you've never done this before. They're not as complicated as they may look, but some of them will take longer than others depending on the detail, so everybody will be working at their own pace because of that. And that's okay. Some of you will finish before others do. But each pattern will begin on one of three different grids. The first one has 4 to 8 rows and columns. The second one has 5 to 10 rows and columns, and also a border just to make the math easy. I'll explain that one more when the time comes. And the other one has 3 to 6 rows and columns. But I'm going to start with this one here, which has 4 to 8 rows. And I'm working from a 12-inch by 12-inch block. Most people who take my class will choose the next size up, which is a 2 foot by 2 foot, but just keep in mind that the math really doesn't change all that much. Even though I'm going to be demonstrating from a 12-inch by 12-inch, if you're working from a 2 foot by 2 foot, or in other words, a 24-inch by 24-inch board, the numbers in your measurement just double, okay? And I'll try to explain that more as I go along. So for this 12-inch by 12-inch board, we just have to divide it up into 4 rows and columns. And I have my measuring stick here. Something I need to point out before I get started is that a lot of straight edges, or a lot of measuring sticks, are designed in a way to where the inch begins slightly inside of the edge of it, if that makes sense, okay? So on this one, for instance, don't assume that your inch begins on the edge, okay? Because that will throw your measurements off. And a lot of people aren't aware of that, so I just wanted to point that out. So I'm actually going to line that inch up on the edge of the board. Okay, so we're going to divide each edge up into 4. Okay, so 12 divided by 4 is 3, so every 3 inches we're going to put a mark. Okay, that's 3, 6, and 9, and it's going to be the same way on the other edges. And again, if you are working from a 24-inch by 24-inch square, then instead of 3 inches, it's going to be every 6 inches. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, so all my marks are in place. So at this point, I just need to connect them. Like that. Now, I'm drawing my lines pretty bold so that you can see them, but something I'll point out to you, whenever you're doing this yourself, I strongly encourage you to draw these lines as light as possible, because some of these lines are not going to be seen whenever your pattern is finished. So there will be some erasing involved later. And they're not easy to erase if you have them too dark. Okay, so we have our grid. Okay, that's for the 4-inch, or I mean the that's for the grid that has 4 to 8 rows in each row and column. Now, if you wanted to create 8 squares, then you just have to find the midpoints in each section. Okay, so for instance, since we're working with 3-inch sections or 3-inch squares, you're actually going to put a mark every 1.5 inches. Okay. And you're going to do it the same way that you did the first time. Go throughout the entire piece and then connect your points and make more lines for your grid. Now for this particular grid, patterns like the stars and stripes here will fit on that, as well as the Kentucky Star and the Swoon. And it continues on this page with these 3 that you see here. Okay, so this is for the grid that has 4 to 8 rows and columns. And the next one's a little bit trickier, but it's really not all that complicated. This one has 5 to 10 squares. But we have to start with a border. The reason why we're starting with a border is just to make the math easy. Okay? For a quilt square of this size, if you tried to divide that up into 5 different sections without putting a grid on, then you're getting into some very complicated math. So we're going to put a 1-inch border on first, and then we're going to draw the grid. So just line your straight edge or your measuring stick against the edge there. Put a mark at the inch. You can go ahead and connect those while you're at it. And we're going to go this way. Okay, and now we have our border. So just as a review, if I'm working from a 24-inch by 24-inch square, as many of you will be doing, then instead of a 1-inch border, it's going to be a 2-inch border. So you're going to measure 2 inches from the edge instead of 1. So now we can create our grid that has 5 squares in each row and column. Okay, so now we have a 10-inch square instead of a 12-inch square. So every 2 inches we're going to put a mark. And we can count the sections now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? Now if I'm working from a larger size or the size that's the next step up, the 24-inch by 24-inch square, again, you're going to double that. Those squares are going to be 4 inches instead of 2 inches. Okay, now we can just connect those points. Always look closely to see that you have your measuring stick lined up well with it. If you're looking far away from it, sometimes it may look like it's lined up and you can be off. Okay, so now we have multiples of 5 in this particular grid. And as I demonstrated with the last grid, if you want to add more squares, okay, say you want 10 squares in your grid instead of 5, then you just need to find the midpoints of each section. Okay, so in this case, since we're working with 2-inch squares, you're going to put a mark on every inch. Okay. And that's going to double if you're working with the 24-inch by 24-inch quilt square, or if you're laying out a grid for that bigger size. Okay, so this is for that particular grid. And these are your options for that particular one, okay? So we have one more grid to do, and this one has multiples of 3. So 3 to 6 rows and columns. So every 2 inches we're going to make a mark. And we can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, if you're working from the larger board size, that number is going to double. Instead of every 2 inches, it's going to be every 4 inches. we can connect the points. And that's it. That's the one that has 3 to 6 rows and columns. Your pattern options for that particular grid are on the back page. They include the churn dash, Ohio star, and dove at the window. Okay, and keep in mind that, you know, if you want to add more squares, I'll review this one last time. Just look for the midpoints of each square, okay? So that's going to be every inch if you're working with 2-inch squares. But again, if you're working from the larger board size, the 24-inch by 24-inch board, you know, you're going to have 4-inch squares instead of 2-inch squares. So these midpoints will be every 2 inches instead of 1 inch. Okay, so this is the very first step, getting your grid drawn out. And as you flip through your booklet, you'll find the final product on the right-hand side of the page with the grid work on the left and how to draw the design out. Okay, and I've tried to help you out with a reference on how large those squares need to be at the bottom of the page. Just to remind you how you need to measure those out. Okay. Once you get your pattern drawn, then the next step will be painting it, and the painting is a lot easier from then on. This is the hardest part, or the tedious part. But I hope this was helpful to you. We'll catch you at another time, and just remember to have fun. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have a good day.